In this video, I'll be working on building some dressers. I'm actually partially into the project, but it's time to start showing you what I've done.
Okay, let's get you caught up a little bit. So first I went to Home Depot. This is from another stop at Home Depot where I had to purchase some more 2x4s. But anyways, I got a bunch of lumber from their Call Lumber cart, which is like 70% off, somewhere around there. Anyways, I got a bunch of that stuff, a ton of nice beadboard plywood. Then I was like, okay, I could use this. I can work with this for the new dressers I'm building. I also had to buy a whole bunch of 1x. I loaded them all up in the truck and took them home, and that's what I'm going to use for the drawers. Off camera, I dragged the plywood out and made a hasty plan. Nothing fancy, just enough to get started cutting. Set it up the sawhorses, snapped a few chalk lines, and grabbed the circular saw. I'm actually building 2 of these dressers at once, so it's a full send from the start. I measured, marked, and ripped down all the panels for the dresser bodies, so let's hope I measured everything right. Time to give these plywood panels some support. Not emotional or structural, just more like a wood skeleton. For the frames, I started with a mix of 2x4s. Some were from pallets I had broken down earlier with my pallet breaker, so if you haven't seen my pallet breaker video, make sure to check that out. Anyways, the rest of the 2x4s came from the Call Lumber haul I showed earlier. Once everything was marked out, I hit the chop saw to get everything cut to length, then over to the bandsaw to rip them down. Yeah, I use my bandsaw for ripping instead of a table saw. I know that's a little unusual. And yup, I still use one of my favorite shop hacks, a circular saw clamp guide, as a rip fence on my bandsaw. It's not fancy, but it works like a charm in my small shop, and that's what really gives me the ability to use my bandsaw instead of a table saw. Next up, I took my router table outside. Nothing fancy here. I threw this together with scrap materials, and it actually looks like that, but it works, and that's what counts. First, I dialed in the bit height, and then I double-checked my measurements to make sure the grooves had the right setback in my 2x2s. I wanted a little dimensional reveal between the frame and the plywood, kind of like a picture frame, and the plywood is the glass. Hope that makes things a little clearer. Once I had everything all set with the router table, I cut the dados into all the 2x4s I ripped down just a few minutes ago on the bandsaw. And these grooves are what will hold the plywood panels in place that we cut earlier on in the project. And this will give the whole dresser most of its structure and strength when everything is fastened together. Cutting all these dados actually took quite a while and definitely was one of the longer parts of this process. So after I completed all that work of cutting all those pieces that go into making these panels, it's time to assemble them, and it's really kind of the moment of truth to see if my plan and my measurements all hold up when it comes time to assemble it. So what I'm doing here is I'm actually taking the 2x4s we ripped down and cut the dados into and popping them around the plywood that we cut earlier on in the video, and then adding glue and nails. These are very important from a structural standpoint because these panels, there'll be 2 per dresser, will make up the sides and the 4 legs of the dresser. Cutting out much of the footage and much of the assembly, they are assembled and they're ready to dry. So I just gotta let that set and we'll move on to the next stage of this building process. This is what I'll be using for assembling the frame of the dresser. Drill bits for pre-drilling, countersinking, clamps to hold the frame together, glue, of course, for the joint, clamps to help hold everything together, and screws, of course, to anchor those. Now, there's going to be holes on the outside, which I will fill in with plaster eventually. Here are the main sides of the dresser, braces for the inside bottom, and the tops and bottoms of the dresser frame. So now I'm going to use the large drill bit to countersink it for the screw heads. I'm adding some screws beforehand to hopefully make the assembly easy. While it's not what most pros use, I'm going to be using construction screws for their speed and strength when it's coupled with wood glue, and then I'm going to hide it with plaster because I'm going to be using paint, and paint hides a multitude of issues. After wrestling all these pieces by myself, I was thinking, there's got to be an easier way to do this. Turns out, there was a better way to do it. I just had to call in the cavalry, aka my wife. She came to the rescue because honestly, trying to glue everything up, hold it square, clamp it, and drive in the screw solo just was not working. It just kept falling down. So huge shout out to her for saving this part of the build. Couldn't have done it without her.
Now it's time to reinforce this even further than probably is necessary, but I'm going to screw these brackets in, or these braces into the corner.
Now on to the drawers. These 1x boards I bought were probably the most expensive material in this whole build. So I started off by measuring and cutting down all the sides, then heading back to the router table to cut the dados for the drawer bottoms. This was a very repetitive task, as I had a total of 10 drawers I was making. For the drawer bottoms, I'm using beadboard plywood, not because it's fancy, but because it was dirt cheap. Seriously, I couldn't even get regular plywood for the price I got this stuff for. And it was thick and strong enough for the job, so why not? While many do not put glue in their dados when assembling the drawers, I am in this case because, well, I'm shortcutting it with the joinery. Instead of doing anything fancy, I'm just gluing and nailing the corners together. So by adding glue to the floor, I'm trying to make it more of a structural component. So that's the idea behind it. Now when it came to seating the plywood floor, it was a little bit of a wrestling match, but I eventually won. One of my favorite tool tricks or hacks, if I can call it that, is using picture frame clamps to hold the corners of these drawers square while I'm assembling them. So basically in the long run, the glue is what holds everything together. But the nails are what holds it together while the glue's drying, and the picture frame clamps hold everything together until I can get the nails in. So that's basically how it all works, but in reverse.
And here's the completed drawer. I got a bit of glue to clean up. I'm not naming any names, but someone was a little messy here. And now I got a whole bunch more of these to build.
And that was just one drawer. After finishing it, I had to wrestle the overwhelming urge to, well, abandon the whole thing and skip building the rest of the drawers and completely start an unrelated project. Maybe build a trebuchet, reorganize the shop, who knows? But no, I committed to 10 drawers. I told my wife I was gonna build 2 dressers, so that's 5 drawers each. So while I did go through the dance 9 more times, I'll spare you the repetition. Let's skip ahead before we both lose our minds. Next up, installing the drawers, but not so fast. First, I had to add extra structure inside the frame. I could have just mounted it directly to the thin plywood sides, but that would have been like taping the drawer slides to printer paper. These aren't exactly light-duty drawers. They're large and they're heavy. The plywood was also recessed by about an inch inside the frame, which meant that without extra wood, the slides would have been set way too far back. Not ideal if you're trying to make drawers that actually open in the front. Installing the support blocks on the drawer slides was its own little dance. 1 step forward and 3 steps backwards. And a lot of muttering probably happened as well. I'd get everything lined up, realize something was off, take it all apart, and then do it again. And of course, I had to do this with like every drawer, so 10 drawers total, because I'm building 2 dressers. 10 drawers, 10 support rails, no, that's 20 support rails, and 40 drawer slider rail parts, because remember, 2 per drawer slide, and there's 10 drawers with 2 rails. And then 0 patience. And then it came time to screw the slides onto each of the drawers. After that, I cut the drawer fronts out and then, well, installed them. Or at least I think I did. My camera decided to block that memory out, and honestly, I might have to. With the main functionality locked in, it was time to focus on the dresser tops. I joined a few 1x12s together, cut them to lengthen the proper dimensions, and yes, somehow, once again, the camera conveniently missed that part. No user error, I'm sure. Just take my word for it, the boards were joined together, and it was beautiful. What you do get to see me doing is cleaning them up, starting with a rigorous upper body workout featuring my trusty hand plane, followed by a cool down session with the orbital sander. I didn't just want to make the top look like a slab of 1x stock dropped on top of a box, so I ripped down some additional 1x material to create a recessed border underneath the primary top. Once installed, it will give a little bit more dimensional depth and nice shadow lines. A little visual flair to say, hey, I didn't just screw this to the top and call it a day, I sanded it too! Before mounting the top, for no particular reason other than that's just how it happened, I went ahead and installed the drawer knobs. I had everything pre-measured and planned out, but ran into a fun little hiccup. The screws that came with the knobs were too short. Why? Because I added the drawer front over the drawer box, doubling up the 1x material. So what's the fix? I drilled a wider hole from the inside to let the screw head sit deeper into the drawer front, giving me just enough thread to grab on the outside. With that solved, I added a back panel made from brown fiberboard. Nothing fancy, just something to help keep the dressers square and stop them wobbling side to side like a cheap card table. And finally, the part that I've been waiting for, adding the tops. To mount them, I'm going for a super simple solution, and that is putting screws up from underneath to mount the tops, just making sure everything's square as I'm shooting the screws in. Off camera, my wife, stained and sealed the top with a poly finish. She also painted the dresser bodies, but apparently the plywood tried to grow its own fur coat, leaving a weird hairy texture, so she sanded that down and gave it a final coat to smooth things out. So it was a team effort, and I really like how it turned out. And here are a few final clips of the finished drawers and dressers, finally looking like real furniture. If you enjoy the chaos, the progress, or just watching someone fight plywood and 2x4s and win mostly, go ahead and like, subscribe, and say hi in the comments. Or say something else in the comments. More videos coming soon, and probably also more sawdust in my shoes.